Get ready for a chilling journey as we unveil 3 horrifying tales that will make you think twice before answering your phone. In this video, we explore the sinister consequences of picking up a call, where mysterious callers, eerie invitations, and relentless nightmares await. Brace yourself for spine-tingling narratives that blur the line between reality and nightmare. If you dare to confront your deepest fears, join us on this unsettling voyage into the unknown. Dim the lights, secure your doors, and let the horror unfold. A husband's dark secret. In the quiet, dimly lit living room of their suburban home, David sat alone, a heavy weight of guilt gnawing at his conscience. The disappearance of his wife, Sarah, 5 years ago, had been a haunting secret he had carried, a secret that had festered like a wound that refused to heal. As far as everyone else knew, Sarah had simply vanished one fateful night, leaving no trace behind. The ringing of the telephone pulled David from his thoughts, and he jumped as if jolted awake from a terrible nightmare. With trembling hands, he picked up the receiver, his heart pounding in his chest. "David," a voice whispered, barely audible yet unmistakable. It was the voice of his wife, Sarah. He knew that voice better than his own, even though he hadn't heard it in years. What is this?" David stammered, his voice shaking. He felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. "It's me, David." Sarah's voice persisted, a chilling, spectral echo. "I've missed you." David's mind raced, and his pulse quickened. It couldn't be her. It was impossible. He had made sure of that 5 years ago. He had taken steps to ensure that he could live a life free from her, a life unburdened by her presence. "No," David muttered, his voice quivering. You can't be alive." Sarah's laughter, cold and mocking, seeped through the phone line, sending shivers down David's spine. "Oh, I'm not alive, David, but I'm here and I'm watching." David's hands shook as he clung to the receiver, the room growing darker around him, the walls seeming to close in. "What do you want?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I want you to remember," Sarah's voice hissed, "the night that changed everything." As David listened to Sarah's spectral words, he felt a presence in the room, a chilling presence that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. He turned, and there in the dim light he saw her, a ghostly figure with hollow eyes and a blood-stained dress, the same dress she had worn on the night of her disappearance. "No, no, no," David muttered, backing away in terror. He had thought he had escaped the past, that he could finally live without the weight of his actions bearing down on him. But Sarah's ghost drew closer, her eyes filled with a haunting mixture of sadness and longing. She reached out a spectral hand toward him, her fingers trembling as if reaching for something that was forever out of her grasp. David's heart ached as he watched her, the memories of their life together flooding back, the love they had shared and the mistakes he had made. He had thought that he could bury his past, but now it had returned to confront him in the most agonizing way. The weeks turned into months, and David continued to receive haunting phone calls from Sarah's ghost. Each call brought with it a sense of dread and torment as she whispered chilling reminders of the night he had taken her life. She played on his guilt, weaving a web of torment around him, leaving him in a constant state of fear and anxiety. Yet the true nature of her purpose remained a mystery. Why did she keep calling? What did she want from him? David couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her torment, something he couldn't quite grasp. David's life began to unravel. He became increasingly isolated, cancelling social plans and withdrawing from friends and neighbours. His once calm demeanour crumbled as visible anxiety took hold, and he was often seen with a haggard appearance, dark circles under his eyes, and trembling hands. Unexplained disturbances became the norm in the neighbourhood, as neighbours reported hearing frantic late-night phone conversations from his home. Rumours of eerie whispers and spectral laughter swirled, further fueling speculation. David's work performance deteriorated significantly, colleagues noticing his decline in productivity and concentration. His erratic behaviour raised eyebrows, as he often talked to himself and abruptly left meetings or gatherings. As David's physical health deteriorated, neighbours grew increasingly concerned about his well-being, speculating about potential illnesses or psychological issues. The mystery surrounding his disturbing phone calls and his deteriorating condition became the subject of hushed conversations within the community. Concerned friends and neighbours eventually decided to involve the authorities, fearing that David might pose a danger to himself or others. When the police conducted a welfare check, they discovered the shocking truth of David's confession about the embezzlement and the murder of his wife, Sarah. The visit from the police was a harrowing experience. They arrived at David's doorstep, their expressions grim as they questioned him about the disturbing phone calls and his erratic behaviour. David, sweating profusely and trembling, finally broke down, admitting to his crimes. It was only then, as David sat in a dimly lit interrogation room, that he finally allowed himself to drift back in time to that fateful night. In a flashback, he vividly recalled the night of the confrontation with Sarah. He remembered the tense atmosphere as she confronted him about the embezzlement. The evidence was laid out before them, an incriminating trail of financial transactions leading to a secret bank account filled with the stolen funds. She had discovered the truth about the double life he had been leading, portraying himself as a loving husband while secretly siphoning off funds to maintain an extravagant lifestyle. Sarah's eyes had burned with anger and betrayal as she confronted him, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "How could you, David?" she had demanded, her hands trembling as she pointed to the damning evidence. "I thought I knew you, trusted you, loved you." David, cornered and desperate to protect his secrets, had lashed out in a moment of panic. In the midst of their heated argument, he had silenced her forever, leading to her tragic death. As the truth flooded out in the interrogation room, David confessed to his crime, his voice quivering with remorse. He had embezzled a significant sum of money from his workplace, a secret that had driven him to commit the unthinkable act of taking his wife's life. He had killed the woman he once loved, and now her vengeful spirit had come to make him face the consequences of his actions. The room grew colder, the shadows deeper, and as Sarah's ghostly fingers closed around his throat, David knew that he could never escape the horror that awaited him in the afterlife. The mystery of her torment had been unraveled, and he would pay the price for his terrible crime for all eternity, haunted by the memory of that fateful confrontation and the choices that had led him down this dark and twisted path. The secrets of Emily's midnight plea. The night was cold and silent, the moon hanging like a pale ghost in the starless sky. Thomas sat alone in his dimly lit living room, lost in the flickering glow of the television. He had long given up hope of ever seeing his wife, Emily, again. She had disappeared without a trace 5 years ago, leaving behind only a void of unanswered questions and shattered dreams. Thomas had been through the grueling process of investigation and search, but it had all led to dead ends. The police had eventually labelled Emily as a missing person, and the trail had gone cold. He had mourned, grieved, and even tried to move on, but the pain of her absence lingered like an unshakable shadow. As the clock ticked past midnight, a sudden shrill ringing shattered the stillness of the room. Startled, Thomas fumbled for his phone, his heart racing with anxiety. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number, a jumble of digits that sent a chill down his spine. He hesitated for a moment before reluctantly answering. "Hello," he said, his voice trembling. Static crackled on the other end, and for a moment, Thomas thought the call might be a prank or a wrong number. Then a voice, faint and distant, whispered his name. "Thomas." His heart skipped a beat as recognition washed over him. It was Emily's voice, unmistakably hers, though it sounded weak and distant, as if echoing from a faraway place. "Emily," he stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Is that really you?" The voice on the other end grew clearer, but still carried a haunting quality, as if it was speaking from the depths of a nightmare. "Thomas, I need you to listen carefully," Emily said. "I'm in a terrible place and I don't have much time." Thomas's mind raced, his emotions a chaotic whirlwind. This couldn't be real. He had imagined this moment countless times, but it had always felt like a distant fantasy. "Where are you, Emily? What happened to you?" "I can't explain now," Emily replied urgently. "They're watching me. I need you to do exactly as I say. You must come to the old miller's cabin in the woods, the one we used to visit. You remember it, right?" Thomas nodded, his throat tight. It was a place they had often escaped to in happier times, a secluded cabin nestled deep in the heart of the forest. "I remember." "Good," Emily said. "You have to come alone, Thomas. No one else. And you must come tonight, before sunrise." Thomas's mind was racing with questions, but he couldn't ignore the urgency in Emily's voice. "I'll be there," he promised. As he hung up the phone, he felt a mixture of fear, hope, and determination coursing through his veins. The cabin was a few hours' drive away, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his car keys and jacket, then headed out into the darkness, leaving behind the safety of his home. The journey was long and treacherous, the winding roads cutting through the dense forest like a labyrinth. The wind whispered through the trees, and the shadows seemed to dance in the moonlight, but Thomas pressed on, his determination unwavering. Finally, he arrived at the cabin, its silhouette looming in the moon's soft glow. The place was eerily silent, and a sense of foreboding washed over him. He cautiously approached the door and, finding it unlocked, stepped inside. The interior of the cabin was cold and musty, as if it had been abandoned for years. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and dust covered every surface. Thomas's heart pounded as he called out, "Emily, are you here?" A faint rustling came from the shadows, and then, like a spectre emerging from the darkness, Emily stepped into the feeble light. She looked pale and haggard, her eyes haunted by unspeakable horrors. Thomas rushed to her side, his arms outstretched, ready to embrace her. But as he touched her, he recoiled in horror. Her skin was ice-cold, and her touch sent a jolt of icy dread through his veins. "Emily, what's happened to you?" Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "They won't let me go, Thomas. They're here, all around us, and they're hungry." Suddenly, the cabin seemed to come alive with a malevolent presence. Shadows writhed and shifted, and from the darkness emerged grotesque, otherworldly beings with twisted limbs and leathery skin. They surrounded Thomas and Emily, their eyes burning with a hunger that sent shivers down his spine. In that moment, Thomas realized the terrible truth. This was not his Emily. It was something that wore her skin, mimicking her voice, luring him into a trap. He had walked right into the clutches of the unknown, and it was too late to escape. As the creatures closed in, Thomas's screams echoed through the night, joining the chorus of countless others who had been ensnared by the same chilling deception. Emily's voice had been a siren's call, and now he too would become another lost soul in the depths of the haunted woods. Echoes of fear, the unwanted call. The room was dimly lit, the only source of illumination coming from a small table lamp in the corner. Sarah sat on her couch, her eyes glued to the television screen, trying to distract herself from the loneliness that had consumed her. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes, a constant reminder of just how late it was. She had no plans for the evening, no one to talk to, and nothing to do but watch reruns of old sitcoms. Just as Sarah was about to give up on her lonely evening and retire to her bed, the phone on the coffee table beside her rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and to her surprise, it displayed an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer. Curiosity got the best of her, and she reached for the phone. "Hello," she said tentatively. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and Sarah could hear nothing but her own shallow breaths. She was about to hang up when a soft, raspy voice finally spoke. "Sarah," it whispered. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. How did this person know her name? Her mind raced, thinking of all the possible explanations. Maybe it was a wrong number, or perhaps a telemarketer who had gotten hold of her personal information. "Yes, this is Sarah," she replied cautiously. "Who is this?" The voice on the other end seemed to hesitate for a moment before responding. "It's me, Sarah. It's been so long." Sarah's blood ran cold. She couldn't recognize the voice, and there was something eerie about the way it spoke her name. "I'm sorry, but I don't know who you are," she said, her voice trembling. There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again. "You don't remember me, Sarah. Don't you remember that night in the woods?" Sarah's heart raced, and she felt a chill crawl up her spine. She had never been in the woods at night with a stranger, at least not that she could remember. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. The voice let out a soft, almost haunting chuckle. "Oh, Sarah, you always were good at pretending, but you can't hide from the past forever." Sarah's mind was spinning with fear and confusion. Who was this person, and what did they want from her? She was about to hang up the phone when the voice continued. "I've missed you, Sarah. I've been waiting for this moment for so long." The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She couldn't take it any longer. "I don't know who you are, and I don't want to talk to you," she said firmly, her voice trembling with fear. Before she could hang up, the voice let out a blood-curdling scream that seemed to echo through the room. Sarah dropped the phone in terror, her heart pounding in her chest. She stumbled back, her eyes darting around the room, looking for any sign of an intruder. But there was no one there. The room was empty, and the phone lay on the floor, silent once more. Sarah's breaths came in short, panicked gasps as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had it all been a cruel prank? A twisted joke played by someone with a sick sense of humour? Or was it something more sinister? Unable to stay in the room any longer, Sarah grabbed her coat and rushed out of the apartment, leaving the phone behind. She didn't look back, too afraid of what she might see. As she stepped out into the cold night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed paths with something far more terrifying than she could ever have imagined, and the memory of that chilling voice would haunt her for the rest of her days. Sarah wandered the streets aimlessly, her mind in turmoil. She tried to convince herself that it had all been a hoax, a cruel prank played by some stranger with too much time on their hands, but deep down she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. As she walked, she couldn't help but think about the voice on the other end of the line. It had sounded so familiar, and yet she couldn't place it. She racked her brain, trying to remember if she had ever met someone with that voice, but nothing came to mind. The night was eerily quiet, and the streets were nearly empty. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she made her way through the city. She wished she had someone to call, someone to talk to, but she didn't want to risk answering the phone again. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah finally made her way back to her apartment building. She hesitated for a moment before entering, unsure of what she might find inside. But as she stepped into her apartment, she was relieved to find that everything appeared to be in order. There was no sign of an intruder, and the phone on the floor was still silent. Sarah picked up the phone and examined it carefully. There was no indication of who had called, no trace of the mysterious voice that had spoken to her. She felt a growing sense of unease, as though she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. Unable to sleep, Sarah spent the rest of the night sitting on her couch, her eyes fixed on the phone. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that she was being watched, that the voice on the other end of the line was still out there, waiting for her. The first light of dawn finally broke through the window, and Sarah let out a sigh of relief. The night was over, and with it, hopefully, her torment. She decided to go to the police and report the strange phone call, hoping they could help her make sense of it all. But as she picked up the phone to dial 911, a familiar voice spoke from the other end of the line. "Sarah," it whispered, "you can't escape me." Sarah's heart raced, and she dropped the phone in terror. The voice was back, and it was closer than ever. She turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. In that moment, Sarah knew that there was no escaping the nightmare that had taken hold of her life. The voice had returned, and it was clear that it would never let her go. She was trapped in a living horror story, with no way out and no one to turn to for help. And as the figure lunged at her, with a sinister smile on its face, Sarah's world descended into darkness, and the horrifying reality of her worst fears became a terrifying, inescapable nightmare. Thanks for watching. To support us, please like and subscribe.